Dear ladies and gentlemen, I am Annette Santashi, and I am here on behalf of 30% Club Poland. It is my great privilege and pleasure to welcome you here. Thank you for your time that you decided to spend the next 1 hour with us. The audience is muted. However, if along the webinar you have any questions, please use the Q&A tab. We would be more than happy to answer your questions. Now, I would like to say a couple of words about the agenda. After the introduction, we will move to the presentation delivered by Dr. Franklin Vrede, which will be followed by a panel discussion from Aspiration to Fulfilment, Journey to Transitioning into Top Positions. And we will add with some closing remarks. I am very excited to announce the subject of our discussion today, Aspiration to Fulfilment, Accelerating Women's Career for Success. The topic is very meaningful and up to date. On one hand, we hope to inspire you, to give women some new incentives in paving way for leadership of the future. On the other, we would like to provide some clear-cut, key, well-defined advice how to take your career to the next level in this global business system, but also gain awareness of the unconscious bias that we are facing and try to mitigate them. So it's the bliss point. Combination of dreams, inspiration, with the reality where we are living in. The webinar has been brought to you by 4 organizations. And of course, when I say organizations, I mean the great people that are making up these organizations. And we are here thanks to them today. INSEAD is one of the world's leading and largest business schools. And within INSEAD, we have INSEAD Corporate Governance Centre, which is one of the leading centers for innovation, impact in the field of corporate governance. European Women on Board is an organization supporting European Union in achieving gender equality in boards by providing networking platforms and also education for women all across Europe. Odgers Berndtson is an executive search company, but also delivers talent assessment and leadership development. One of the key priorities for Odgers is an inclusive and diverse corporate culture. And 30% Club Poland is a social campaign aiming to boost the number of women in board seats in companies across the world. The target is to achieve 30% minimum representation, female representation in boards. And the Polish chapter, of which I am privileged to be part of, started last year. So that we are not wasting any minutes of our precious time, allow me please to introduce our special guest today. I am honored to have Dr. Franklin Vrede with me, who is a passionate coach, researcher, and energetic lecturer. As part of the INSEAD faculty, he taught in many executive leadership programs, but also he is partnering with major INSEAD clients to create customized development solutions for their leadership cadre. It's exactly where the research, academic research, is meeting the needs of the business. So theory and practice. Please welcome. The floor is yours, Doctor.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And that's so, yes, I'm very honored to join you this afternoon and to speak a little bit about my research and experience in the context of transitioning into top positions, something that I find a fascinating topic. It's challenging for any leader, male or female. But I found also from my experience and from research that there are some particular reflections which come up when looking at the challenges that, in particular, women experience, the obstacles that they experience. And let me start by saying that in general, that there's no discussion that there is bias, that there is unconscious bias, and that there are systemic obstacles standing in the way of having more female leaders in executive positions and non-executive positions in board. At the same time, when working with specific individual cases, the question is, should we just spend our time looking at the systemic obstacles, or is there also something that individuals can do, that women leaders can focus on in order to increase their opportunities? So this is sort of the context for what I'm going to share with you. And let me see if I can get to the first one. For some reason, my slide is not, yes, there we go. So I hope you can all see this. And what I had in mind is not to bore you with too much theory, but to really talk about two coaching vignettes, two actual clients that I've worked with. These are two ladies that connected with me after INSEAD program because of the challenges that they were experiencing. So the first one will be in the context of moving into a CEO position. And the second one more in the context of stepping into a board role, the chair of a board. So without much further ado, let's take a look at this first coaching vignette. And I've called her Kirsten. Of course, that's anonymized. And German lady, seasoned executive, happily married, dual career also. Her husband was also very successful in his career, teenagers. Yet what she told me at the end of the board program we were doing, that she had just left her company after 7 years, and that had not been the plan. So let me tell you a little bit about the company. It was a company that had been was run by the founder, successful in what they were doing, software development and sales. The shares were not owned by a dominant shareholder, stock market listed. And the way they had organized themselves in the board is, apart from the CFO and other roles, is that the CEO was really the person driving sales and product development, and that Kirsten was the COO and was the go-to person for any issues in the organization and that needed to be implemented or when there was troubleshooting needed. And there was also a board, active board of directors in the system involved. So this was the company, and Kirsten was earmarked as the successor of the CEO. CEO was already a bit older, was getting ready to leave, and at some point announced his departure, was a man. At that point, having been spoken about and designated as the successor, Kirsten expected to get the role of CEO. So she had also had conversations about it with various people, selection conversations. Yet the board told her that she was not going to get the role. And the role was going to an outsider, to a man in this case. And of course, she was pretty frustrated by that. She was disappointed, she felt betrayed, and she did not understand what had happened and could only see that some sort of game had been played with her. But still, she wanted some coaching with me to find out what had happened and what she had missed. So this was essentially the question we focused on. Is there anything she had missed apart from, hey, this is just classic male prejudice and betrayal and bias that she had to fight. So what we worked on, and this is also sharing from my experience, is that nominations at the top are not just based on whether you have demonstrated the competence and whether you have delivered the results. It is a political process in which various individuals try to increase, maximize, or at least sustain their power, depending on who gets selected. And of course, it may be that the board vis-a-vis the founder CEO was involved in some sort of a power struggle. And with the CEO leaving, it may be that they saw their opportunity to, well, change things a bit. And perhaps Kirsten was not the ideal candidate. So the question that we worked on was, as a earmarked successor, as a talented executive aiming to grow further, are you willing to be more political? And what I found, and what I find with more women leaders, talented leaders, is that sometimes there is an issue around becoming more proactive in a political way. And perhaps political sounds negative, but for me, it's more about influencing stakeholders. And in particular, developing relationship with the board, more active relationship with the board, and identifying that the board plays an important role in deciding who becomes the next CEO. And what's also important is to understand that having been there for so long was not necessarily in her advantage, because perhaps she wasn't seen as someone of the future, and perhaps too much someone of the past. But the key thing here, which we worked on, was to realize that perhaps these decisions are not based on merit, that it's not a meritocracy system, but that it's a political system. Bias is involved, but also what could be in your own empowerment is the way you influence the various stakeholders. So another thing we looked at is how was she being perceived? What was the profile that, at least from the board perspective, Kirsten had? And it appeared that because she was in the CEO capacity and sort of was the sidekick for the CEO, she was seen as someone in a more supportive capacity, not someone who did the hard stuff, bringing in new projects, bringing in the revenues. And that, I find, on average, reinforces your position as a talented female executive if you are being associated to what is seen as the hard stuff. And another thing that comes up often in looking at whether or not to select women for top positions is the extent to which they are associated with the core business of an organization. And whether that business is around technology, whether it's about finance, for instance, for example, in the financial industry, or in any other industry. It's about, are you associated with some sort of indirect activity, or are you really focused and credible in what this business is all about? Then there's the aspect which sometimes is seen as a bit masculine. Nevertheless, it plays a role. The extent to which you're being seen as someone who wants to rock the boat, who's willing to change course of the organization, willing to, especially if, like in this company, the revenues had plateaued a bit and the company needed some fresh wind, a new direction. You know, are you being seen as someone who has the courage to have some challenging conversations, to come up with some innovative ideas? Or are you being seen as someone who, well, does more the ongoing business? And the last point is about how, as an individual, you deal with the transition into top positions. What I've come across with female executives, and was the case very much with Kirsten as well, is that she was not feeling that she had the license to already behave like the CEO. And first thing is out of respect for the current CEO, but also because she felt that she was not there yet. And that first she needed to get the role, and then she would take some space, be more dominant in the leadership team, and operate from the chair perspective, so to speak. And my recommendation is for talented women, to anybody who wants to get CEO positions, is to early on already start demonstrating the behavior, the mindset, the interventions, and the way you spend your time in a way that represents that you've made the transition, or at least you are making the transition. So the final thing we spent some time looking at is a question I hear a lot from ladies, from female leaders, is this CEO thing really for me? Because yes, it comes at quite a sacrifice. Question marks about, can I still be a mother? Can I still be with my family? And well, who knows? There are leaders that I've seen who have managed to find some sort of way of doing it that worked for them. Yet it's never ideal, and it does come at a sacrifice. Another thing is the famous imposter complex and the doubts that women have about their capacities. So there's always a question, am I credible enough? Can I really do it? And what I've discovered is that these question marks don't come from the outside world, although they may come from an unexpected group, which is peers, because they don't want you to break ranks. But that these ladies, they hinge on well, two legs, you may say. One is that they are convinced that they are the ideal candidate, and their profile shows for it. On the other side, they still had doubts, and I found that I needed to spend quite some time helping them to accept the facts that based on their performance, based on their history, based on all the experience they've gained, they would be the right candidate, and that there's no need for them to challenge themselves. But it is indeed something that female talented leaders often need to work on, and either with a coach or with a mentor, but it's something that plays a role. And if they don't get over it, they will display it in their behavior and in their choices. In the case of Kirsten, she had already left the company and was even wondering whether she wanted to go back to business and to CEO positions, because she was enjoying this in-between position so much and spending time with the family, etc. And in a way, it was, well, nothing wrong with making that choice not to go back, but I feel that we would miss out on a lot of talent if too many talented female leaders would opt out because of the fact that it's difficult. It is difficult. It's not easy to get there, but I do think that it is doable if you focus on the right things that get you being seen as credible, and if you work on the doubts that you may have in your mind. Okay, so this was the first vignette that I wanted to position here. It's something we can perhaps take questions on later on, and also perhaps have a discussion on. I'm not sure how this will go into the panel, but this is just one vignette. The second one is a lady that I also met at INSEAD. She'd done an executive MBA, and of course, I've tried to anonymize the information as well. But let's say that she was Dutch, living in the UK, and also someone with a happy family life, young children, and part of a family or organized family company. So she was asked to step up to become the chair of the board of this family company. And this is when she met me and wanted some of my guidance. If we look at the company, it was quite an old company, a century old already, and being handed over now to the third generation. Had been led for a while by two male leaders of the second generation in mining and energy, really old industry. And because of that, facing quite some pressure, environmental pressure, and also having the need to innovate, a plateaued company, we may say. They, in this transition, they had the ambition to create a board and also to assign a new CEO from the family. So when I spoke to Els, her intentions were quite ambitious with the board. She appreciated the opportunity to step in. She had learned a lot in her MBA and in other programs about what boards are about. So she really wanted to give back, and she wanted to establish a professional governance system, wanted to develop a good relationship with management, be very supportive, and she really wanted to make it work. Well, very soon we were talking about quite other things. Things unfolded not so productively for her. And the first thing she discovered was that the CEO did not have a very developed idea about corporate governance and thought that the board was just there as a useful sounding board, not having any thing to say or to challenge about his proposals. What she also discovered was that there were some family conflicts going on, actually conflicts from the second generation, which incidentally involved the fact that too much power had gone to the male family members and too little to the female family members. And there was still a lot of pain and conflict around this. And that was being brought to the board. And this became a feud and made it very difficult for Els to be a chair in that board. She, at some point, also tried to set up a board charter. How do we work as a board, and what's our agenda, what's our relationship with management? And this was not really welcomed. It was actually opposed, met with a lot of resistance. And before she knew it, there was a lot of criticism on her role as a chair, and things really got out of control. To an extent that she was ready to walk away from all of this, and she felt really disappointed. The great opportunity she had seen as a chair had completely disappeared for her. So what we found in reflecting about this experience is that it actually is important to set yourself up for success when you accept a board role, and particularly a chair role. The first point, giving back, is something that many board members have as an ambition to step into a board role, but it may not be enough as a motivation. Also because it may be that it's not about giving back. And perhaps it's more about contracting well with the board or the whole governance system about what will exactly be the role and the added value you would want to have and under which conditions. Another thing is that Els felt it somehow as an honor to her family. And what we realized, and this also comes from my research, that board work shouldn't be too much seen as an honor. This is also a reason why sometimes it's not well remunerated. But it is something that is more and more being seen as a profession. So it means that you really need to ask for certain conditions to be there, and that you need agreement from all stakeholders that you can really deliver success and that you can set it up in a structured way. So one of these first things is to get agreement about the governance setup, what the role of the board will be, what the role of the CEO will be, and making sure that there are aligned idea about how the governance system will work. And of course, the question is, could she have been successful in any circumstance facing the family feud? Well, we don't know. The only thing that she concluded was that it would have been useful to address the family feud early on and to make the effort to take it out of the board. And what she also discovered, that perhaps as a female board member, she somehow gravitated toward being the facilitator, being the one who pacifies and tries to reach compromise. And that was being made of advantage a lot in a way that it was almost abused. So one of her conclusions was, perhaps I should have become a bit more strict and assertive early on. So, and this also comes from my research. One of the things we concluded was that it was important for her to assume complexity. She may have been a bit too naive stepping into the board role. And like many early board members, having a too rosy or too formal idea about how a board works. And my experience, my research tells me that in most boards, there's a lot more happening than you think. It's more complex, and it's also not a team. It's a very complex social system where a lot is happening. Sometimes there's more happening outside of the board in the governance system than there's happening inside the board, and the board is really used only as a formal gathering, but not a place where the real governance work is done. So one of my recommendations is, not to be too naive going in, assume complexity, try to really get to the essence of what may be the complex dynamics going on. And for that reason, also make sure that you organize a support platform. In the case of Els, later on, she discovered that there was a lot of value in bringing in board members, very experienced board members, known in the country for their board authority, to bring them in the governance system as some sort of mediator or advisor, and that was quite useful. And of course, you can use these people and others as as support buddies, but also mentors. And she also told me that it had been useful for her to have the coach to be able to look at these dynamics and have the time to look at these more in detail. So this is one of the few things that I also use in my teaching at INSEAD, which I call the iceberg of board dynamics. And I'm not saying that in all boards exactly these aspects are going on, but I've seen it in quite a few boards that you may be surprised by the kind of dynamics that take place, not only in family companies, but also in organizations where there are various shareholders, where there may be existing networks from people who know each other from other boards or other organizations. And that there's also quite some narcissism going on and ambitions that individuals have. So as a board member, you may be confronted with this, and the learning is not to become aggressive. The learning is not to, for example, take the male archetype as your guidance, but to find ways to not only end up in a facilitating role would be my recommendation, but to address topics early on, and to also realize that dealing with some of these dynamics happens outside of the board and not necessarily in the board meetings. So here's where I would like to conclude my presentation. It was very quick, very brief and staccato, probably these two vignettes, but I can also take a few questions on them, which probably you will have.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. And actually, I received a couple of questions, if you would be so kind to answer. I think one of the most interesting is, my career has been mainly in consulting. I would now like to start a family, which seems impossible given the long hours, stress, and travel in the job. How do I make the transition to a good work-life balance without having to sacrifice my career growth?
So this is the eternal question, of course. As I said in one of my slides, it does come with a sacrifice, and that whether you're male or female, senior roles at the top, they perhaps will eat into your balance, your work-life balance, your private life. If you don't have a family, it will eat a little bit into your private life. At the same time, what I at least talk about with female leaders is you are allowed to do it your way. It doesn't mean that you have to do it in the same way that you've seen from male executives, of whom some also openly tell me that their work is actually number one, not their family. Although they would never say that out loud in a group of people. They just attach a lot more value to their work, and that's why they put more time into their work, and they allow it to eat into their private life. And I've seen quite a few examples of female top executives who manage to find a balance that works. It may be that you are not always the one putting your children to bed. It may be that sometimes you cannot participate in certain management meetings face to face, but you make it work in your way. And of course, it also requires something from organizations. And this comes back to, don't be afraid to negotiate with organizations to do it your way and to say, I will accept the role, but only on these conditions. I hope that answers the question.
Yes, thank you. And the second question, could you please enumerate 5 top most frequent mistakes which are affecting and sabotaging women's career and lives? Maybe if we arrive to 3, it should be all right.
So, well, what I find is that women tend to believe in delivering real results. And more than the men I teach and coach. So I've seen that a majority of men, they like the game playing, they like the political dynamics, and they want to get good at it. Often I find that women, they don't see themselves as a political figure and they want to do real work. So that's an important one to consider. I'm not recommending to go completely to game playing, because doing real work is important, but you also need to accept that it's not just about doing hard work. Another one is that the way women build up their network is sometimes different and not always to their benefit, meaning that they speak to me about people they like or not like so much, and that becomes a big thing. Whereas I look at to what extent is it important to connect with this person as a stakeholder? Is it good to have this person in your network because they could provide information, support, they could be an advocate for you? And so to not allow personal resentment to play such an important role. Another thing is whether you want it bad enough. So what I've come across is that, and this comes back to, is this for me? But it's not only the question of the imposter complex. It's also the question of am I eager enough? Am I demonstrating this? Am I making it a priority? Am I putting enough energy in campaigning and demonstrating that becoming a top executive is important for me? These would be the top 3 for me to focus on. And by the way, I also think we shouldn't over problematize to say that women have so many problems getting into top positions. It's just there are also obstacles.
Of course. Thank you so much. After this very inspiring speech, we are moving to our next point on the agenda. And let me please introduce you to our great moderator, Sue Johnson, who is a global partner of diversity and inclusion at Odgers in London. Please, Sue, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Annette and Dr. Franklin, for a fascinating presentation. So we're going to go straight into the panel. If you could put the next slide on for me. So let me introduce to you these 4 fantastic panelists, all seasoned business executives who are passionate advocates and ambassadors for equality and inclusion. So we have Diana Senanayake, who's CEO of BNP Paribas and Securities Services Southeast Asia, Hedwige Nuyens, Chair of European Women on Boards, Magdalena Magnuszewska, CEO of INELO Group and a member of the 30% Club, and Nasir Zubairi, I'm so sorry, Nasir, you told me how to say this, Zubairi, CEO of the Luxembourg House of Finance Technology Foundation. So thank you all for joining us today. And just building on what Dr. Franklin was saying, I think we're going to talk about, first off, from a personal perspective, aspiration to fulfillment, what do individuals need to do? Then organizations, again, there's definitely an action for organizations. And I also want to look at a societal perspective as well. And let me go straight to Hedwige. So in your position, obviously head of the 30 European Women on Boards, in your perspective, do you believe that women need to adjust and adapt to make it as an executive?
Thank you so much, Sue, for giving me the opportunity to speak today. So let me first say that I disagree quite honestly with some of the things that were said before, in that sense that, no, I don't think it's all about adaptation. I really think that systemic factors are playing a major role as well. And so should women adapt? I think we should first say that if we want competitive and sustainable companies tomorrow, we will need to use all talent we have, and that means diversified talent. If you want to manage diversified talent and attract diversified talent, you will need another style of leadership. And so this means that if we want to use and to do a much better use of talent and women talent, we need to value and cherish and embrace the diversity of talent, not only men versus women, but also between women, between different origins, etc., etc. So I would say, no, please do not adapt to the current system. We at European Women on Boards, we of course will help women to understand the system, to make it more easy to access those positions. But at the same time, we encourage and we help companies to see and to know and to try to find how to attract women and how to also deal with that diversity and with the complexity of decision making and the complexity of talent. So of course, I would say not adapt, try to understand the system and try to make sure the best talent is used and the best talent is nominated.
Thank you for that, Hedwige. So Magdalena, if I can come to you, you've sat on both sides of the fence. You've recruited women into boards and also you run your boards yourself. It was interesting, Dr. Franklin talked about the imposter syndrome. Can you give us some examples or some advice of how women should state that they are actually the best candidate for the role?
Sure. So actually, my experience is more on, recruitment from outside in, because that's the main source of candidate I've been recruiting when I was recruiting for my boards. So it's a bit different than, looking at the career path. And I think it's might be more comfortable for women to actually try to grow from within, but also it raises challenges. And I think, in both of those processes, you would see that I think it's like a common pattern that actually your confidence is important. You need to believe that you are up for the position. And I think this is what I see a lot of candidates are missing. So when I see a woman coming for a job interview and often have this hesitation that Franklin has, that's clearly, undermines her position in this job interview. And on the other side, when it's me, when I understand what's going on, I can help her. When on the other side, there is a man, and this is like 90% of the processes, he would not help. He will say, okay, so she doesn't know what she wants, don't waste my time. And that's it, yes? So I think, first, be really sure that you want the job and you believe that you can do it, yes? And, it will always come with the risk, and it's your personal risk, but to get to the top, you need to stand out from the crowd. Yeah, there is no other way. So there is a need of sacrifice, in terms of hours or commitment or stress. It's very difficult for me to imagine that the senior position will not come, with stress sometime that you need to handle. Some situations are, the situations that are not pleasant, but still you have to deal with it. So those kind of elements, you need to really understand yourself, because each person has, strengths and weaknesses, and try to, first of all, seriously answer the question, where I see myself, where do I fit? And if you have this insight, understanding that this is proper role for you, then, you also should I think someone said that before, that the element that women don't use to the extent men do in the recruitment process, but in general is the network. You need to come to people that, know the organization, know the people, and to your own benefit. It's not only because, they will help you in the recruitment process, but you will end up in the organization which, is close to what you have imagined, because, the interviewing process is like both parties selling to each other some kind of view of, themselves versus the organization, and those views not always happen to be true in all elements. So it's always better to check independently what you are going. And first, I would really encourage women to do the research on the salaries, because there are tools in every market that can provide you with numbers for each of the position, like the more standard position, and don't refer to your own recruitment, to your own salary, especially if you work long for one organization, because it will not favor.
So we'll come on to salaries later. Thank you for that. Nasir, if I could come to you, I'm interested in your perspective around your recruitment roles. You've obviously a lot of men and women and candidates in front of you. What advice would you give for women to really differentiate themselves? Because we've talked a lot about perhaps we focus more on the job rather than the network and the politics. What advice would you have?
Yeah, hi, Sue. This is a difficult question, because all I can see is that something is going wrong between sort of, I'd say, middle management and senior management. In many professions, increasingly in today's world, in the Western world, and in many of the countries I've lived and worked in, particularly in the services sector, financial services, legal services, I happen to know the data, we are seeing more women as sort of associates being hired at the junior level. But then when you look at the partners or the boards of the senior management of those firms, it's a male-dominated, senior management team. And I have to admit, I don't know what is going wrong. We've launched ourselves our own campaign to discuss and bring insights into this area. Obviously there are people, or women, but also some men, obviously, that make choices in their lives which about their lifestyle, about risk, about having children, that plays a factor into that. But what I've noticed, and is upsetting and is leading me down a path that I don't feel is right, is that when advertising senior roles, I get very few women applying for those jobs. Now, there could be an argument saying maybe the way we've crafted the job description is masculine. I've had that checked because I thought about that. And no, it wasn't in particular. And we focused very much so on trying to eradicate and create neutral job descriptions. But it's become concerning to me that, the proportion of women applying for any senior role that I've ever advertised is minuscule in compared to men. Now, I work in the intersection of two industries which are incredibly male-dominated, financial services and technology. But still, the application rate is lower than I would have expected. Now, things need to be done more broadly in those industries to increase representation and diversity, but I don't know the answer here, Sue. It's, we've gone out and we've headhunted specifically for women so that we could increase the diversity of applications. And I must say that for me, critically, I believe in quota, I guess, if you could say, or diversity at the opportunity stage rather than at the outcome stage. I don't want to be hiring in people, to fill quotas on a board or of an executive team. I want to be hiring in the best person for a job, but I want to be able to assess a fair representation of candidates. But something is wrong there. And, there's many things that could be debated for a long time. But, this is where I think everyone, men, women, boards, whatever, everyone needs better education. I think there is something to the way women approach a job application. I had an event here for Women's Day where a number of recruiters said that women look to ensure that they fulfill every criteria on a job application, whereas men will apply for a job even if they only fulfill 10% of the criteria, right?
So that's quite a big difference there. Yeah. Okay, so let's go on to organisations in a minute. So thank you for that. Diana, a very warm welcome. I understand you have connection issues, so if we lose you, our skip, but a warm welcome. So just going back to the original question, linking to Dr. Franklin's presentation around mental preparation for board roles. So the question is, how did you prepare yourself for the board role in terms of being mentally in the mindset of not to have imposter syndrome and I can do this? What would your tips be?
Yeah. So thank you so much, Sue, and I'm sorry I came in quite late. So I mean, to be very frank, you know, when people do ask me those questions, for me it's kind of a natural evolution. So funnily enough, you know, it's just part of a career plan, and as you go along, you know, you just continue to learn, you continue to progress, and then you don't really kind of consciously think about this, and you don't consciously think that, okay, you know, I'm a woman and there's a difference between you know, a woman and a man. It's very much about building your experience, building, I would say, your knowledge, and making sure that you also build the confidence, right, throughout, and not feeling that, I think what Nasir actually highlighted about women feeling that they need to be, you know, tick all the boxes, you know, fulfill 100%, you know, of the role requirement, versus men would be fulfilling probably maybe not 10, but maybe 30%. I would say it's just a natural path of growth. And from my perspective, you know, having reached where, you know, where I am, and even getting into boards, I think you need to build that confidence. And women, you know, the same way as men do naturally, probably, and women a bit less naturally. But I think being conscious about this, but not lacking confidence. Once you have the knowledge, you have the expertise, I think it's a kind of a natural path. And personally, that's the way I've kind of evolved over the years, and also, you know, in organizations. So
just building on that, can you give an example of how you've built your own personal confidence?
Yeah, so I would say, first and foremost, I would say when you get into a role, I always kind of build a plan, right? So when you get into a new role, you know, you have the standard 90 days, 100-day plan. And you want to make sure that, you know exactly what you're getting into. And then as and when you go along, you know, you discover things. But you always need to make sure that you have a kind of an end in mind. And as you achieve those goals, and you may not achieve all the goals, right? Because you always discover things along the way. But at least you kind of, as and when you achieve, you kind of build also that confidence in you. And it's not about just stopping over some of failures, because failures, you learn a lot from those failures. But I think you have to keep focus. Focus is really critical, and make sure you have that end in mind. And I think once you do that, it's, you know, it helps you get to the next milestone. But, you know, you have to go milestone to milestone, and you might fall time to time. And that's very normal. It's very natural. And there's no difference between men and women in that sense. Men also make, you know, they do have failures, but they probably stop, you know, they don't stop at that failure. And I think that's how you build that confidence. And you need to look forward. That's absolutely so.
So planning and milestones. So Hedwige, if I could come to you, you know, in your experience, what really makes successful appointments?
Yes, absolutely, with pleasure. And that's also the reason why we created European Women on Boards. It's exactly to give a positive answer to the question Nasir has, how to find women, to the question Franklin has, why doesn't it always work the way we thought it could work? And it's really about building that talent pool indeed. That's what we do, building a talent pool of 1,000 women saying, I'm ready, I'm eager. That's what we do. We also have change in policy. And that's also to answer the question of Nasir. We see huge differences. You have countries like France, where you have 44% women on boards. And you have countries where it's only 8%. So this is not about the women, because they have women both countries, isn't it? It's about the culture, it's about the openness, it's about the way companies are welcoming women, have a talent pipeline, have a culture embracing those diversities. So the most Successful companies are companies able to embrace this talent. The most successful women are women who are able to stay themselves. The most successful men as well. And so we shouldn't have to choose between career and happiness, between success and taking care of your children. The question, the leadership of the future, is how to embrace those different things and go to a balanced leadership in general, in terms of all talent, in terms of all gender. And that's what we do with European Women on Boards.
So, thank you for that. I love that comment. No one should have to make a choice between career and happiness. So Magdalena, let's expand the conversation now to talk about more about organizations, what they can do. So what actions can an organization take if they are starting potentially from a non-balanced board? What should they be looking to do first?
Okay, so first, I think that you need to understand the reason why that is. So first, analyze whether, as in some cases, you are good with recruitment process. So you get women on board, for example, like typical, I don't know, investment banks or law firms. They got a lot of women in the basic positions, but they lose them during the career path. And this is, you know, set of actions you need to take if you have this situation versus other situation when, as Nasir explained, you have candidates. And of course, none of, I think, you know, the very little candidate problem, it's not easy because go, like, for example, we have this problem in software house, like majority of the development, majority of students that are leaving the technology, increase the number of students, then you need to promote this kind of you know, professionals among women, and it takes a lot of time. While if you have other problems, so you're recruiting women, but you lose them on the way in the career development, and try to be conscious of the environment that actually supports women development where you are. This being payment, promotion opportunities, having in mind that maybe women are not, you know, shouting the first line for the promotion, create flexibility. And, you know, someone told from the panelists before that, you know, you need work time. You know, majority of board members, male and women that I know, have kids. I have 2 kids. It's doable. And, you know, typically kids have parents, not just mother. Yes, so, you know, the partner can also play a role in this for this kind of, you know, environment that helps women to get to the top. And I think this last comment from me, important element is also mentoring. And I think for young women professional, I would advise men, because they will help them to understand how to maneuver, which for now is still male dominated.
Thank you for that, Magdalena. So just building on that, if I can come to Nasir. So in any of these topics, it's a majority and a minority, and we need the majority to really embrace action to drive change. I'm not asking you to speak for men in general, but in your experience, how can we involve men more in this discussion and debate to really accelerate action?
That's a difficult one. You know, I've been speaking and being involved in a multitude of initiatives and panels for International Women's Day and women's diversity for a number of years. And what I always found astounding, as I would be interested to see the data for the participants on this call, 90% of the audience is women, right? You need men to be there as well. And some of the stupid excuses I hear that men come up with us for why they're not attending, they feel that they're going to be vilified, or that there'll be extreme feminism from and they'll be scared, you know, from the audience. I mean, once or twice I felt very attacked as being the only man on a panel. I mean, I'm kind of glad that this is happening online as opposed to physically in some ways. But I mean, you know, if you're honest and straightforward, you just need to be able to work on this and listen and learn. And it's a discussion that has to occur, right? There are some things I think women need to do to make things better, and there are many things men need to do to make things better. But the system won't change if it's just women attending these events. It's women who are paying attention, and many men are still being rather dismissive of it, be it that many are being dismissive of and saying that there's not a problem, that we need to, I'm completely fair, etc. But, you know, the problem still persists. As I said, you know, it's the stats that Hedwige pointed out to are very interesting. I would be interested actually to see them more in a transitory environment. I mean, boards are often quite transitory, especially with non-execs. I've had times when I've had 60% women on my 19-person board, and other times, which is a problem right now, I have 3 women on a 19-person board, and it does change. Taking individual stats doesn't always work. But we need to still work as a whole and as a population and a set of executives to make this better. You know, rather than pointing fingers at people and say, you need to do this, you need to do that. We need to share and work on it together.
So just in terms of pointing fingers, ladies and gentlemen, we've just run out of time. I wanted to talk about more on confidence and equal pay, and we've just run out of time. So to my fantastic panel, if I could ask you to sum up in, you know, 1 word or 1 sentence, you know, from aspiration to fulfillment, what would your biggest top tip be for the audience in terms of what is the 1 thing that you'd recommend people do? So maybe start with Hedwige, if I may. What would your 1 tip be?
Network and find allies.
Network and find allies. Thank you. Diana, what would yours be?
I would say be confident and try to coach another woman in your organization to get there. Brilliant. If you're at a senior level.
Let your career ladder down, let everyone else up. Thank you. Magdalena.
I would go with, you know, think about where are your strength elements and build on it, because then you will really be able to succeed and believe in yourself, be self-confident.
Brilliant. Do what you're best at. Thank you. And finally, Nasir, what would yours be?
As I would say to everyone, continuous learning. Everyone can do better by listening and learning and adapting to their world.
So thank you all very much. I'm sorry we've run out of time. So much more to discuss. Over to you, Annette.
Yes, I'm back. Okay, we arrived to the end. Right now, I would like to encourage you to take part in the feedback survey. You can use the QR code or the link. Yes, now it's visible. First and foremost, I would like to express my appreciation to our speakers and panelists for their valuable contribution. My gratitude goes as well to all of you who attended and you were present here with us, but also to those who behind the scenes made it possible for us to meet today. And yes, girls, I'm talking about you, Agnieszka, Milena, Sue, Monica, and Ivy. Thank you again so much. If I had to sum up with 1 sentence, the key takeaway for me is that the world is changing, and we, and when I say we, I mean we all, the system, as Hedwige said, the companies, the businesses, they need to change their ways to enable women to progress. But we, I mean women now, we need to understand that we hold the power to change our future career, even if we have to start with small steps. And with gaining confidence, we arrive to the milestones that Diane mentioned. Thank you again very much. It's been a great honor to be here with you. Again, here is the feedback survey, so please use it, and thank you again.